Why did Ubisoft release Ghost Recon Breakpoint in such a poor state, knowing the negative impact this would have on their customers' trust, especially after doing a successful launch of a very similar game with The Division 2? Interesting. I think it's time for another game, chat. Sitting at a 57 score on Metacritic and a much lower user rating, we can't say that Ghost Recon Breakpoint is being exactly well received. But why are fans so unhappy with the game? Let's make a quick summary of some of the main issues. The game's too easy, and even on the higher difficulties and for what a lot of fans expected to be a tactical shooter, Breakpoint does not present any challenge or truly reward tactical gameplay. The ability to kill enemies of any level with a weapon of any rate, as long as you pull off a headshot, could even be considered a good feature in a different game. But in a looter shooter that supposedly revolves around your gear score, this renders the main hook of the game meaningless and adds up to the problem with the lack of challenge. Ubisoft showed some promising details about the AI in the new Ghost Recon. But what we ended up getting was enemies that are in fact artificial but by no means intelligent. When you combine these with the slow alarm system and positioning of the guards that allows you to prey on them without ever being noticed, the chances of players facing real challenge or dying are very low. Should that ever happen, your character will simply respawn close by, with no penalty for the careless approach. Breakpoint was also released with many bugs and performance issues on all platforms, from frame drops and problems with the sound, to hard crashes and even PC shutdowns. When you combine this with the bad facial animations of your created character, uninteresting weapons and loot, and a world that feels lifeless and empty, it doesn't look good. We could also make an entire video just on the excess of microtransactions here and how they influence the gameplay in a negative way, but I'll summarize by just saying that they are at the center of many of the game's structural problems, forcing Breakpoint to abandon some of its vision and core mechanics to integrate different gameplay elements that can be more easily monetized. An example of this is the removal of most of the survival mechanics previously showed, which initially helped to give Breakpoint some identity and to differentiate it from Ghost Recon Wildlands. The survival components of the game seem to have been sacrificed for a more streamlined and fast-paced gameplay, more in line with a game centered around gear score and constant looting. Also removed from the game were the AI companions, which in Wildlands allowed players to enjoy missions without having to team up with friends or strangers. The companions and their synchronized shot mechanic were one of the best and most well-received features from the previous game, so removing it from Breakpoint seems to be a deliberate incentive to make us play with friends, which usually is a great way to make the game seem more fun and for players to overlook some of the issues that would otherwise be more apparent. Other common complaints about Breakpoint are problems with immersion and coherence within the game, the bad implementation of the cover system, and the weak story that fails to deliver on an interesting premise. We've seen troubled game releases before. The reason why this one is interesting is the quality expectations given by Ubisoft's latest games and their awareness about the genre with recent releases of other looter shooters. This is not even new territory for Ubisoft. Games like Far Cry, Ghost Recon Wildlands, and even the most recent entries in Assassin's Creed follow this formula of an action open-world game where your character progression revolves around a gear score system, increasing little by a constant flow of endless loot dropping in different rarity tiers like candy from an uncountable number of corpse piñatas. Ubisoft has been using this exact formula so much that all of their games are starting to look like one single franchise, with each game's setting being the only differentiating factor left to let us tell them apart. So, why does Ghost Recon Breakpoint look like Ubisoft's first attempt in this genre? Another surprising factor is the recent history of releases in this looter shooter category. Destiny 2 launched to a mixed reception and has been investing resources ever since to compensate for the poor game state at release, recently even going free to play with Destiny 2 New Light and throwing in all the Year 1 content. Anthem's controversial release earlier this year had a big impact on EA, their stock prices and more importantly, on the fans' trust for the publisher. We believed Ubisoft was taking notes when they successfully launched The Division 2 in March to a positive consensus from the community who recognized the quality and the quantity of the content present at launch. But the state of Breakpoint makes me doubt that. Was The Division's 2 healthy launch just a strike of luck? Well, I have a theory. Maybe we will learn more about it in the future, but based on the information we have now, I think Ubisoft Paris, the studio behind Ghost Recon Breakpoint, had a vision for the game revolving around a more hardcore and tactical version of what was presented with Wildlands. The survival elements showed during the game's development all pointed to a sequel that rewarded tactical planning and a more deliberate approach to combat. Unfortunately, it seems like that vision did not fit well with the publisher's expectation for the game's life cycle and its ability to be monetized. The tactical and survival mechanics probably made the original concept harder and slower, which would reduce the mass market appeal of the game, while also making the game gear score system a poor fit for the main hook. In the end, it looks like those just had to go. What we see now is a skeleton of the original idea for Ghost Recon Breakpoint, stripped out of some of its most fundamental body parts to make space for the organs in the Ubisoft formula, and ultimately Frankensteined into yet another looter shooter, born into a world full of competition, but with no clear benefit or differentiating factor over the existing alternatives other than the Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon brand, which it unfortunately does not live up to. What about you? Why do you think Ubisoft released Ghost Recon Breakpoint in this state, despite knowing how it would be received? Or do you think maybe they believed the game would have a better reception? Let me know in the comments down below. See you next time for another game chat. Thank you for watching.